Hello again, these are my hands, I'm Bay Mud, and this is the Arturia Microfreak. I haven't brought this little guy out in a while, but I do still have a lot of love for it. Off the top, you will have heard an example of a pseudo sample flip you can achieve by modulating the sample select on this unit, and that's what today is all about. We're going to try different examples of getting different samples on each key, either at random or in ranges of our choosing. That way we can do things like turn it into a pseudo-groove box, or take samples we're very familiar with and use them in a way that almost makes for generative sound design. As usual, I'm just doing this for fun. I bought my Microfreak about 6 years ago when they were first released. I was really excited by the unique keybed and digital qualities, and in the intervening 6 years, I've always found it very inspiring. There's always things I can do with it, and it's never really gotten old. So if you have one, hopefully this is interesting to you and you can follow along. I think I'm supposed to ask people to subscribe as well, so let's consider me having done that. The first thing you're going to need to do is select the samples you'd like to work with and move them over. In my case, I'm using a bunch of electric piano and acoustic piano sounds all at the C3 note to play chromatically on the keyboard, but also some acoustic drum sounds I had found online somewhere a while back. You can do what we're going to do here with the stock samples that came with the Microfreak firmware, so feel free to follow along, and I'll give examples of that as well. If you are loading your own samples, you'll need to use the Arturia MIDI Control Center, which I will say is a bit of a tedious process. It takes a long time to transfer over, so get yourself a coffee or make a snack while it's all transferring, and you'll be fine. So once you've got your samples loaded onto the Microfreak, you're going to then want to select the sample oscillator type and then choose the samples that you'd like to work with. So let's do that together. I'll try to zoom in on the screen occasionally so you can follow along. It is a tiny screen, so hopefully you can still see what I'm going to try to do here. So let's see, initialize patch. We'll go to the sample oscillator. There we go. And now to select your samples, you hit Shift and turn the type knob, and now you're in sample select. So here we've got some stock pianos, all kinds of stock samples. I think I've added one to this patch, some Mellotron flute. And then for today, I added a bunch of other ones way at the end. You can tell I have a lot of available sample slots open. I believe there are 120 odd, and you get about 3.5 minutes of overall time. And each sample can be a maximum of 24 seconds within that 3.5 minutes. So you do have some room to play with. I simply haven't done it very much because, as I said, it's just a tedious process. I don't plug things into my computer very often, and move samples over. It takes a while. So, but I had some ideas and they have worked out, so I thought I'd share them. So in my case, you can see here I've got some various pianos and electric pianos. And then if I just scroll further down here, some drums. So we're going to start with sort of an infinite piano patch. Let's make things a bit somewhat generative. So we have 16 different electric pianos that I've chosen, and I'm going to just drop myself somewhat in the middle, so from 105 all the way to, I believe it was 120. So let's choose about 113 or so. And now we're on a simple Rhodes sample. So let's start with that. So beyond using the sample oscillator and selecting the sound you want, this is going to be all about the key/ARP modulation lane in the matrix. That means we can use the keyboard to modulate the sample select. So let's set that up now. So we need to scroll all the way down in our modulation matrix to the key ARP row and the assign one column. The other existing patch points won't help us modulate our samples, so we need to assign our own parameter. We can do so by pressing the assign one button and turning the type knob, because we've already gone into sample select via shift and type, so it remembers that. So assign one, turn the type knob, sample on the screen. Now, this patch point modulates the sample select, in this case, by the key ARP. That means our note selection will modulate the sample selection based on how much we dial that in. For now, no change because we haven't actually dialed it in at all yet. So if I now scroll this up just so you can hear it, there it is. It's going into drum territory, which we don't need yet, but you can hear that it is working. Now, in this case, for the patch that I'd like to demonstrate here, we want to go into our utility menu, preset, modulations, and key ARP mode. I'd like key ARP mode to be random. And what that means is at every key press, the key ARP modulates our sample select, in this case, via a randomness. So, and you'll hear all kinds of non-piano samples and some dead spaces in there simply because we have to fine-tune this now. So if we once again dial this in, I had cranked the knob so we could hear it, but let's dial it way back. And if I recall, around 5 or so was good enough. So let's see. Basically, you just want to make sure you're not getting out of the range of samples you selected. Now, that may not be employing all 16 that I've loaded in of piano sounds, but we don't hear any dead spaces and we don't hear any drums, which we would if we went too far in our modulation intensity. But hopefully you can see the potential of this already. At every key press, we are randomizing the sample choice, and in the case of my sample range I've selected, they are all basically types of electric piano or acoustic piano. There might be a chime mixed in there for fun, but it's going to be the right note chromatically, but a different sample sound in the similar family. The idea here was we're all familiar with kind of Rhodes and electric piano and piano samples, so let's kind of do something maybe unique with them. Take something familiar and push it into a bit weird territory, almost like an uncanny valley effect of taking a tried and true sample and glitching it out a bit. So that's a good start. And that really is the crux of it. You can now play your melody and get different piano sounds on every key press, which is kind of cool. And now the rest of the modulation options are up to you. First of all, I'm going to put paraphonic on. And let's put an ARP. We'll do latch and a pattern. So we're holding, let's just do D sharp minor, drop it down. And now it's just cycling through our electric piano samples in that range because we've carefully dialed in the key ARP modulation for sample select. We can also do other things still though, like modulate our filter cutoff. We can adjust our envelope. Let's see, let's modulate our filter cutoff by our LFO just to get something going here. Slow that down. And already, hopefully you can see the potential. We can also change the length of our samples. And if you go far enough, it becomes reverse. So now you have a reverse piano patch using standard electric piano and piano samples, but kind of randomizing and making it, you're in control of the melody if you want to play the keys, but the sound timbre will be random, which is very fun. And I hope you can see kind of the potential here. Okay, so now we've got this kind of infinite piano patch, which I've glitched up and modulated and had some fun with. But what about that example off the top where we had drums and piano on the same 2 octaves? How do we do that? Well, that's another one I can show you right now. Let's go to another initialized patch, start from scratch. And once again, sample oscillator, sample select. And in this case, what we want to do is go all the way to my drum sounds, and you can choose whatever sounds you'd like in here. So here I've got a kick, snare, just an acoustic drum set that I thought would be fun for this. And what we'll do in utility, preset, modulations, key ARP mode, we had it on random for our piano sample, but now we'd like to keep it on linear, which that means it's going to increase as it goes up the key bed and decrease as it goes down in a linear fashion, not randomized. So we can dictate what sample really ends up on which key by fine-tuning that modulation in a similar way that we did with random, but in this case, it's more purposeful to choose 2 specific octaves. So how do we do that? Once again, scroll to key ARP, assign 1, same thing as before. Press assign 1, turn the type knob, that assigns the sample. And now we can play with the amount of modulation. So if I just crank it up. So I only have 8 acoustic drum sounds here. So that is going to run out on the second octave here, but kick, snare, get some hats, cymbals and toms. And so here's our last ride, and then it becomes chromatic after that, which is fine. But these first 8 notes are now a drum kit. Hopefully you can start to see the potential there. But then the fun also I discovered is because I had loaded those 16 electric piano and piano samples right prior to the acoustic drum kits, they're also all here. A whole octave of them. And in the case of these, they're chromatic. I chose the C3 sample note, so they are chromatic on the keyboard. So we can have a drum kit here. Now, let's do something better than that. We have 2 options, really. I can create an ARP and then turn it into a sequence using either the keys and then live play drums, or the opposite, do an ARP with drums and then live play keys. And because of the different paraphonic modes or monophonic modes, we'll either get some note stealing and some staccato-ness, or we can set up unison and things in an interesting way to allow things to play out. Obviously, there's only so much room we have with our polyphony, lack thereof, and our notes that we can play, but let's have some fun. I'll turn on ARP again, as well as hold and pattern again. And then we'll go into our utility preset menu to change our sequence ARP length this time. So right now it's at 16. Let's dial that up to 32 so that we don't get too bored. It adds some variety, just more steps. And in this case, because we're going to record an ARP with the drums, we don't care about what notes I'm playing. It's not necessarily chromatic. So I'm just going to use as many fingers as I can to get all of them in here. And then we can dial in, let's keep it at 8ths. I mean, that's fine. So to lock that in, what I'll do here is press Shift and then either sequence A or B here. So Shift A. Now we're in sequence mode. It has saved it to sequence A. I can turn it off, turn it on again. And now our drum sequence is saved. Now we can go over here and play our chromatic piano samples. But as you heard, it takes away, we're on monophonic mode, so it takes away from the drum sequence. These are the limitations. This isn't meant to be a groove box. We're just pushing the boundaries with it a little bit. I can dial back the release and play more staccato. But that only works so well. We can also turn paraphonic mode on. That drops the volume a little bit because it spreads the voices out, but it does work. But if we want a little oomph, let's turn unison on. Bear with me for a second. So Shift and paraphonic. Now we've added a bit of accidental chorusing to our drums. So utility preset voice, unison spread. We'll dial that back to almost nothing, as far back as it'll go. And actually, let's go into our unison voice count. Right now it's 4, so every hit gets all 4 voices. Let's dial that back to 2. So now we're reserving 2 voices at each hit. So let's see. Okay, that's not bad. So we've got our drum sequence playing, and we have an octave of electric piano at different samples that we can use. And then if we wanted to add some variety here, we could, let's say, modulate the cutoff via pressing the keys. So the more we press, the more we'll change our filter cutoff. Let's try that. There we go. Now it also neuters the filter of the drums a little bit, but now we get a little variety. So and hopefully you can start to see some fun stuff you could do here. And you can modulate all kinds of other things. Like you could modulate the timbre, and we're in sequence mode, so we could record some automation of some of this stuff too. So for instance, you could record, say, the shape knob. So if I press record and then simply turn, well, we'll turn on, we have 4 slots available, but if I press record and then turn a knob, you can hear the shape knob is adding a bit of variety to our drum hits. So hopefully you can see the potential of this already, and you can go in and add all your standard kind of modulations and envelopes and things like that that you would normally do, and still take advantage of our weird kind of pseudo mini groove box we've set up here. Okay, that's all well and good, but let's recreate the example where the piano is the sequence and the drums are live played. And to do that, we simply rewind and recreate our steps using the piano octave for our sequence. So I will once again turn ARP on with hold on and pattern is on. And now we do want to play chromatically a bit more carefully. So I'm going to do something kind of with some C minor type notes. Okay, we can play with our timing if we want to, but let's keep it kind of slow and add some spice just to adjust the gate a little bit. If you go too far, it starts to bring in some of the other things we don't want. But okay, we've got a starting point here. Now let's lock that into our B position in our sequence. So Shift B, back into sequencer mode. We've got it saved into B there. And now we can live play on this octave to add some drums. So hopefully you can see, the examples there of how this could go. You start modulating things like your length and loop and things like that. You get a bit of kind of a pseudo delay. You could also change oscillator types because the granular oscillators also support samples and operate on samples. So now we're in scan grains. We can add some chaos, change our density and the scan point. Let's try cloud grains. Some fun there. Hit grains is always interesting. I'm not sure how well it'll work here. Let's dial back the chaos. There you go. You got a bit of a delay, which we don't have onboard effects, so I'll take anything I can get. Kind of fun, right? And because we saved both of those sequences in this preset, we can go back and forth. So this is our drums. Now hit grains is on, so we're getting a bit of variety there. But then we can press B and back to... So there you go, back and forth, and mess around with it. And as promised, here is an example of a sample flip patch that just uses the stock samples that were provided as part of the 5.0 Microfreak firmware update a while back. So you don't have to go connect your computer and follow along with your own samples. You can do it with the ones on the Microfreak. Simply modulate the key ARP, modulate the sample select by your key ARP, and in this case, I've selected linear so that I know what sample is on which key. So let's mess around. Kind of interesting, right? And then if you wanted to, you could go into your preset menu, modulation, key ARP mode, change that to random, and now so there you go, you have options, and that's just using the stock samples, nothing loaded from the computer. So you can play around to your heart's content with sample flip and make use of all the keys and all the possible sample permutations via random and linear key ARP modulation on your Microfreak that you've had sitting around forever, and have fun with it. Okay, so that's it. Hopefully that was helpful or interesting or inspiring. I certainly have just been having fun trying to do new things with the Microfreak that I've had forever. It's so easy to get caught up in new gear constantly. It's nice sometimes just to look at something that we already own and not worry about what is coming or what isn't released yet, and just look back at something that has a lot of cool features that we bought for reasons many moons ago at this point, and make use of it in creative ways. So I hope you got something out of this. I'm Bay Mud, more to come. Lots of weird gear and new stuff coming as well. But if you have Microfreak questions or suggestions, I'm happy to take a look at them. Let me know in the comments what you think, if you would make use of this, or maybe there are tricks that you like on the Microfreak that I haven't explored yet too. All right. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later.